Welcome to The Screen Queen, the show where I'll be talking about your favorite TV show or your favorite movie. You'll just have to listen to find out. This is your host, Samantha Parrish.
Hello there, and welcome back to the show. My name is Samantha Parrish, and as always, I am your main media queen, the Screen Queen. So, there's no easy way to say it. This is going to be a heavy episode. I haven't had a heavy episode since probably The Nightingale. Before I go any further, I have to give the heaviest of warnings that this episode will contain racial themes and sexual assault. I will do everything in my power to pick and choose my words carefully, and there will be times in this episode that I'm just going to have to admit that I might not have a certain word that can sum up what happened. This is a film that's just, it can go so many different ways to not have the right material, but I will do everything I can to give this episode justice. A Time to Kill is one of those films that once you watch it, it's impossible that you can forget it. But it is also a film that has so much raw violence that parallels what's going on today. For a film in 1996 that had the goal to cover a hot topic and do it in a way that everything felt answered, everything felt addressed, everything felt accommodated, so you didn't turn a blind eye to things that, well, were turned a blind eye to. But it's still one of those films that just showed a hard part of life with how far racism can go. So, with that in mind, thank you for bearing with me as we dive into A Time to Kill. Now, for those that have never heard of A Time to Kill, I will give you the same synopsis. Most people that are familiar with the show know that I don't believe in keeping people in the dark, and I want to save everyone that trip to IMDb. The plot of A Time to Kill follows a working class man named Carl Lee Haley. And all he does is work to support his family. And then everything comes crashing down when he gets the call that something horrible happened to his little girl. His daughter was just going on a trip to the grocery store to get some eggs and other stuff for her mama. And two drunk white men took her and sexually assaulted her and left her for dead. And within no time at all, the two men were picked up for statutory rape charges. But, unfortunately, they were never charged and they were let go without any hesitation. A little black girl had her life traumatized and ruined, and the attackers just walk away. That's not going to work well for Carl Lee Haley, though. He hides out in the courthouse and he shoots the two white men that destroyed his 10-year-old daughter. And now a whole new slew of problems begin, that Carl Lee Haley is now going to be on trial for murder and possibly given the death penalty just because the system failed his child. And the only man that can do this, and the only man available, is the lawyer Jake Brigance, who is doing everything he can in his power to help Carl Lee Haley. But unfortunately, this does spark hatred among him, dangers for his own family, that everything just ignites a whole slew of racism in the town of Mississippi. And this also catches the eye of the Ku Klux Klan. So you see, things just go from bad to worse to, oh my fucking god, what is gonna happen next? It's a film that does not hold back. It just keeps going down the line of what raw hatred looks like. I don't think I have to tell you how many cases you see every fucking day of what happens to girls like Carl Lee Haley's daughter and the terrible things that happen every single day that we read about in the news. Excuse me. And it's heartbreaking. It's absolutely heartbreaking. I don't know if I'm going to be able to go through this episode without having to get teared up, so thank you for bearing with me. Racism is something that I don't talk about. I've known about it. I've discussed it. My best friend is black, and this is something that we've also talked about with what happens in the world every day. And I remember one day when the racism was getting so bad that my best friend Ace had reached out to me just to talk about it, of what's going on here. And he just said, I don't like what's going on. I don't hate you. I will never hate you. But I don't like what's happening. I said, I understand. I don't like it either. And then I made a Lil Wayne joke, and then we were laughing about it afterwards, and just, because that's what we do in our friendship. We always know how to, like, bring things to the table and then break the ice, because we know there's nothing we can do about it. Me being a white woman and him being a black man, we just have to sit back and just do whatever we can to help the ones around us and make the world a better place the best way we can. But unfortunately, in cases like Plots to a Time to Kill, it just makes you question, when the fuck is justice ever going to happen? In regards to this film, it does take liberties from many cases that have happened, because A Time to Kill is loosely based off a true story. Now, just for clarity's sake, I'm going to read this word for word, because I don't want to leave anything out. Many people in the show know that I like to make sure that the facts are right for someone, just in case they carry on for what I say in this episode. And I do have to use the words exactly as scripted, so just giving you a heads up. So here we go. In 1984, at the DeSoto County Courthouse in Hernando, John Grisham witnessed the harrowing testimony of a 12-year-old rape victim. The inspiration for the book came from the case of the rape and assault of 12-year-old Marcy Scott and her sister, Julie Scott. Unlike Grisham's depiction, however, the Scotts were white and their assailant, Willie Harris, was black. According to Grisham's official website, Grisham used his spare time to begin his first novel, which explored what would have happened if the girl's father had murdered her assailants. He spent 3 years on A Time to Kill and finished it in 1987. So, when I read that, I had to take a step back and I had to just basically say, okay, so this movie that's about a black girl that has been brutalized by 2 white men was originally a white girl that was brutalized by a black man. And I can't unhear that the original case had the races switched for the story. And I can't argue that I like the fact that it's switched so you do really get the commentary about a serious issue. Because unfortunately, I hate to say it, as a white woman, justice is a little bit easy. But for a woman of color, not the case. I wish it wasn't. I wish I didn't have to fucking say that. I really wish. But it still happens. And John Grisham switching the races for the story, it does make it more thought-provoking. It does make the commentary. He made a huge risk to switch that to show what happens on the other side of it all. That can't be ignored anymore. But the fact that his angle was primarily the father's perspective. The father had just found out that his little girl had been raped and left for dead. With all of the violence in this film, you do feel the tragedy of it all. There are family members that feel the weight of the loss for their child, that there's nothing you can do about it but just sit back and just go, that's it? They're gonna get away with it? It's a feeling you see everywhere in the news. I mean, shit, you see a majority of that in many other films where justice has failed someone, but with A Time to Kill, you feel it a lot more. I don't think I've ever really heard of a story that is entirely derived with, what if the father stood up in court and did something about this. It has many different angles that goes into the structure for this film, with the true story with the reversed races, and the angle being about the dad, and knowing that no matter what happened, like, the justice still kept failing. It didn't go after the two men that went after a little girl, but it went after the father that murdered the two guys. Like, it's an ugly case that does have a lot of realism behind it. I hope with all of my heart that I commentate on that in the best of my abilities. I know there are some people out there that are listening to this episode and know my heart and soul and where I'm at, and how it's not easy to talk about these issues. And I wish I had a better palette of words. I have done everything to listen to a lot of my friends to know what's going on, because it's not enough to just watch the news and see what's going on. By talking to all my friends and hearing the issues at hand and their take on it does help me see what's going on, and I hope it gets better. I truly do. I hate having to watch the news every day and see who's just getting attacked just because of the color of their skin. It still will bother me till the end of my days, and I need to just move on to their topic before I get upset. Okay. So I'm going to take a little break, a little palate cleanser from the social issues to talk about the cast of the film. This has one of the best casts of all time. I just have to say it. I've said that for a lot of my episodes, but this one, they could not have chosen a more perfect cast for these characters. So I'm going to start with the main attraction. This guy had the biggest year in 1996, and that is Samuel L. Jackson, who plays Carl Lee Haley. What Samuel L. Jackson brought to this role, no one else could do it. I say that a lot, but I shit you not. If you've watched this film, or when you watch this film, it changes the way you see Samuel L. Jackson. Back when I was getting my favorite movies together, and I watched a lot of his films thanks to my mom, she showed me the Long Kiss Goodnight, which I also talked about, and then came A Time to Kill. Knowing that this guy had a back-to-back schedule from The Long Kiss Goodnight and A Time to Kill, it still sits with me every time I watch one of these films. But what he did for A Time to Kill, I mean, he said things that stays in your heart. It stays in your mind. He brought this character to life that represents a father that is so frustrated and exasperated with a system that failed his child. He breathes so much life and breathes so much tears to a man that just wanted his little girl to get justice, and now he might be facing the death penalty just for wanting justice for his child. We've had films like this before, like we've had Death Wish, where you have one guy that put everything in his hands to go above the law, but unfortunately, the law does exist, unfortunately, to prosecute those that had to do everything in their power because the law did not do anything. And even when his character is on trial and is getting badgered by lawyers and constantly being berated and asked questions that have nothing to fucking do with what's going on, just to incite him. It's an ugly part of the society that does say the wrong questions to people of color, that have brought up the wrong issues, and unfortunately, because this plot exists in an area that is severely racist in its roots, he's up against it. You see what he has to go up through, and he doesn't hesitate to tell like it is. I love the one part in this film, and this has been showed in trailers whenever they would do a little sneak preview for the film. They always use this one part where he's getting badgered by the prosecuting attorney played by Kevin Spacey. The irony, another guy that definitely should have had the law shut in his face. But anyway, we'll get into that later on. Uh, and the prosecuting attorney just goes, "Do you think that anyone that raped a child should be free in 10 years? Anyone that kills a child should be free in 10 years?" And Samuel L. Jackson just goes, "No, no, no, no." And then finally he just like has enough. And he gets badgered to the point that he goes, "Yeah, they deserve to die, and I hope they burn in hell." That line has forever lived in my heart. There are many parts of this film that live in my heart. But like I said, this film is entirely based on the thought of what if a father had taken the law in his own hands. This is something a father would say. It's something my grandfather would say if that ever happened to me. Carl Lee Haley is one of the guys that you feel like you have known all your life. Someone that's lived down the street from you. Someone where his kids have played with your kids. But you also know, too, that no matter what happens, if something happens to your child, you do anything for your child. And I do know that Samuel Jackson does have a daughter in real life, so it does make me wonder if those feelings of him being a father of a little girl had a major part to play with it. I don't think there's any actor out there that has done a film without thinking of what if it happened to my child. So I'm going to have more to say about Carl Lee Haley later on, but I want to go ahead and move on to the other guy, the other big boy, and that is Jake Brigance, played by Matthew McConaughey. Now, to me, before I ever got into Matthew McConaughey's films, this was the first film I ever saw him in. And then the irony that most of the films I watched afterwards were him playing lawyers. And it's like, that's interesting. But I've never felt that was a typecast. Even though Matthew McConaughey has put a lot of his McConaughey-isms into a majority of his characters, like Wolf of Wall Street and Dazed and Confused is basically just him playing himself. I mean, you can't prove me wrong on that one, and I don't think anyone can prove me wrong for that one. But still, looking at the facts and the timeline, this was a huge deal for Matthew McConaughey being on the up and up. He had been in some horror films here and there, and he was in Dazed and Confused, like I said, and knowing the fact that he went from playing like some kind of like whatever dude to a man that's gonna make you fucking cry your eyes out. This is the film of Matthew McConaughey's career. He's done so much more, and there is, but nothing will ever compare to Jake Brigance. You feel for Jake Brigance being in the slough and turmoil of every root of racism coming up, and all Jake wants to do is get Carl Lee Haley off the fucking death penalty. And he's put through hell. His family is going through so much stuff. He's constantly threatened almost every day for what's going on. He's truly tested as a character, and you feel those tests just with what Matthew McConaughey put in for that character. But to also add a little bit more into what happened for Jake Brigance, this is kind of a semi-autobiographical character. Matthew McConaughey does take Jake Brigance and brings him to life, but John Grisham is the real inspiration behind Jake Brigance. A lot of his personality, a lot of his mannerisms went in there, so I'm fully convinced that Jake Brigance is just half Matthew McConaughey, and the other half is just John Grisham, and they just like split this character into two, and I have no complaints about that. This character blends so well with everything going on that you can breathe around Jake Brigance, but you also feel the danger for Jake Brigance too. And then there's another little gem in this film. Someone that we've called America's sweetheart, and that is the lovely and talented and amazing goddess that is Sandra Bullock. Now, when we look at Sandra Bullock now, she is everywhere. I mean, you could throw a dart and you'll find a film that she's been in or a film that she's produced. She is a one-woman show, and she is such an inspiration. And ironically, she comes from my home state of Virginia. But what she does in this film is just so charming. It oozes with charm. I love the fact that she plays a character that is just wanting to help with the whole situation, you do know that she feels the gravity of the situation, that this is a very intense racial case, and she is just down for anything. She's down to help out, whatever has to happen. I love the line that she says in there when she's convincing Jake Brigance to work for this case, and she goes, "Oh, and my father is filthy rich, so you never have to worry about paying me." She said that line so beautiful. I want to marry that line so much. When I saw her in this film, it did kind of unlock a memory for me that I had watched this film at a much younger age. Okay, so I'm going to give a trigger warning, but there is a very intense part of this film where her character is kidnapped by the KKK, and when she is up there dangling half naked and a man comes to save her and she's like, no, 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 no. Some bad's going to happen to her. And when I saw this film for the first time, I'm like, oh God, I did not know that I watched this when I was younger. It became like a Dory moment from Finding Nemo where I'm like, oh, so I have watched this a lot younger. It has been a film that I've seen and just took me a while to put the pieces together. But, oh. She is just the charm of this film, and she brings so much emotion to this film as well. Everyone brings so much emotion. Samuel L. Jackson, Matthew McConaughey, Sandra Bullock, and there's also the hate that you feel in this film as well. And that hate is brought on by Kiefer Sutherland. Now, you could throw a dart and find a film that Kiefer Sutherland has been the villain in, but 96 was just that was a weird villain year for him. He was in Eye for an Eye, where he played a convicted criminal that went after Sally Field's daughter, and that's another film we'll have to get into their point. And then turn around the same year, and then he plays the brother of a racist rapist, and I'm like, damn, it's a weird fucking double negative for this guy and the characters that he played. But this one, it's just a testament to his talent that I despise him in this film. He truly does show what someone will do to despise someone else of another color. There's so much that he brings to this character that truly does not see anything wrong with hating another race. I hate that. I hate to have to say that. I hate the fact that people exist out there that have no issue hating someone of a different color. But what he does is just so vile. And like I said, he's played an amalgamation of antagonists, but this one just, it is just a disgusting, verminous villain. I don't know if verminous is even a word. I may have just made up a whole new word, but I made up a whole new word for him because of what he does playing this character. Like I said, it's like a dime a dozen with many villains that you've seen, but this one does hit close to home with the fact that you can hear something like that said, just like his character in A Time to Kill. But there is a bit of a family connection in this film. Kiefer Sutherland's dad, Donald Sutherland, is in the film playing Jake Brigance's mentor. And I'm like, I love both of these actors, and I never once saw them as father and son in this film. That's how good this film is, and the differentiation between the two of them, and how far apart they are from scenes that you can see them as the character and not go, oh, father and son are in this together. And I kind of like that. It could have been a very, hurtful angle, but also, too, it had me thinking of the fact that this is the second time that Kiefer Sutherland has worked with Joel Schumacher, the first being The Lost Boys that I covered in my Halloween series. And so after I got to really get my filmography together and go, oh, so this is the second time they've worked together, I can see why Kiefer Sutherland was chosen for this film because of a prior working relationship. And there is also Kevin Spacey, but do I feel like talking about him and giving him praise when clearly he is not meant to be having praise at all? No. No, I'm not. He's going to be coming up in other episodes for the Screen Queen, and I'd rather just deal with that when the time comes, but I will finish off the rest of the cast. Even if they're not on there for a long time, the impact is not forgotten. Like, Oliver Platt plays Harry Rex Vonner, who is the right-hand man of Jake Brigance, and he's a skirt chaser, he's a drinker, he's not the kind of lawyer you want to have, but he works with Jake, so you know there's something good about it. And he's not really someone that's too vocal about emotions. And he said one of the best lines, in my opinion, is when he says to Jake Brigance, "You've inspired me, and I'm uninspirable." Like, I just love the way that line came together, and he brought that line to life. It could have been said by anybody else, but he made that line gold. Another one is Charles S. Dutton, who I'm sure you guys have seen in a multitude of many different films and TV shows, but I will forever associate him with A Time to Kill playing the sheriff that is just flabbergasted and exhausted and frustrated with his racist town. And another one I can't not mention her, Ashley Judd, who plays Carla Brigance, the lady love of Matthew McConaughey. And she's not in this film a lot, but she's just so good that she could be on there for 5 minutes and feel like you know her character, you know you like her, you know you want the best for her, and that's just the great thing about Ashley Judd, that I love what she brings to every film. And then, I can't not mention it. I feel like I'd be hurting myself if I didn't mention this. The lovely and talented and amazing Octavia Spencer has a few seconds in this film as the nurse that takes care of Ellen. And when I saw this, I'm like, oh, Octavia Spencer's in this? And, like, I knew from the few seconds, like, oh yeah, she's destined to be a star. I just knew from that few first seconds, even though I have already seen her in other films, but, you know, this was one of her first. I was like, yep, this is pretty cool to see on her resume. I feel like if anyone were to try and remake A Time to Kill, it's just impossible. One being the fact that some of the scenes are just so iconic and emotional, you can't capture that same chemistry again. It's like if you were to remake Dirty Dancing, or if you were to remake Schindler's List, whether it's something that's driven by emotion without societal commentary, or a film that is driven by societal commentary, the cast really does bring both of those things to light in a way that no one else can do it. I can't see anybody but Matthew McConaughey playing Jake. I can't see anybody but Sandra Bullock playing Ellen. I can't see anyone else playing the vermin in that film. Everything is portrayed just as it needs to be. But this film has had a bit of a weird time with censorship, though. When I started to catch this film on other channels, it was a very weird feeling that I kind of got the gist of how a certain channel felt about the film, that even though this film had to do a lot with many hot topics, but there were just some networks that just could not take the chance, and they had to censor a lot of it. When I caught this film on A&E, they went above and beyond to make sure that you could not even see the word being mouthed. A&E is, they're very anal about stuff like that. They'll put like a little blur box over the actor's mouth so you can't even see the word. They'll even put like a blur over someone's like butt, even if they're wearing underwear. Like, they're very, very, very conservative. It's an old people's network, so it makes sense. However, TNT was the opposite of that. I was very surprised when I caught this film on that channel that they didn't spare anything. They let everything out. You heard every word, every racial slur, every bad word, so you could feel the gravity of the situation. And I felt like TNT took more liberties to not feel ashamed for something like A Time to Kill that was just doing its job to show a commentary and giving that trust to certain viewers that can handle that kind of material, or they need to hear that kind of material. They need to understand the material. So imagine me sitting at my desk and I have the movie on and I'm just listening to it for background noise, and the scene comes up where Jake Bragance's wife is pleading with Jake to drop the case because now the racial tensions have hit home. There was a burning cross in their front yard, and their daughter is being mocked at school and is being called a N-word lover. And I heard the N-word, and I'm like, what did she say? Like, I've heard it obviously in the DVD, but to hear it on, like, TV, I'm like, what? They didn't censor that out? I was a little bit shocked. And it made me respect TNT for putting that in there. I don't like that word. I really don't like the context of it. But there are just some things that have to be said in a certain story if it needs to have that word present, if the shock value is being used for intelligence. And that's a great example of it. But I feel like I can't ignore the fact that I have to talk about what is the best courtroom scene of all time. Now I say that as there are other amazing courtroom scenes, but there is none unlike A Time to Kill. That was my first introduction when I was reintroduced to this film, was the courtroom scene from this film. Even though I had not seen anything or knew anything about this film, that film just showed me exactly what this movie is about, with the final testimony that Jake Brigance makes to free Carl Lee Haley. Now, when it comes to courtroom scenes, there's no right or wrong way to do a courtroom scene, but most of them usually have some snippet of a flashback to what happened, or you'll get the entire recreation of the crime that happened. Like, a film that comes to my mind is The Accused, where it showed exactly what happened to Jodie Foster's character in that film. But A Time to Kill does not give you flashbacks. You know what happened. You don't have to go back and see a horrific crime happen over and over and over again. But there are certain details that did not get addressed that Jake tells the entire courtroom. And the way he does it is to tell everyone to close their eyes. And he tells them the story of a little girl that was just coming home from the grocery store, and she was snatched in broad daylight and brutalized and urinated and then left for dead. I don't think I've ever seen a film that had so much silence that it spoke volumes. There's no music playing. There's no one else talking. It is just deathly quiet that you can practically hear the air in the room. And Jake Brigance has just reached the end of it, and you see so much in his face that he's so disgusted that it had to come this way, that the reality even hits him about what happened to this little girl, and how it hits close home to him, being the father of a little girl. And then he says the most powerful words that has lived in cinema history. Now imagine she's white. And everyone in the courtroom opens their eyes as if they're like, oh my God. The bigotry had blinded them so much that they were willing to have a man be given a lethal injection because the system failed his child. But it wouldn't have failed a girl who was white. It's unfortunate, but it's true. It's sad, but it's true. There are no lines that compares to that one. None. You feel the weight of that message, not only with the way Jake Brigance says it, but the way others have reacted to the testimony. You see jurors that are fighting back the sobs. You see some of them that are just so disgusted, and for the right reasons and not the wrong reasons for once. To me, it's a little bit sad that not many people know about A Time to Kill. And I have to remind myself that not everyone is going to see every movie that comes out, even if it has the best director, the best cast, the best story. It still just kind of gets swept under the rug, and it just kind of got swept into the 90s. But things like Samuel L. Jackson's performance, the courtroom scene, that has been able to push this film a little bit further, that people find their way to it. It is a raw story, but it is one of the most realistic films that still echoes today. This was one of the films that taught me a lot about life better than the school systems did. And I'm very grateful that I watched it when I was younger, so I could learn about what was going on in the world around me, so I could become more perceptive. I was already perceptive enough as it is when I was younger, but there were just still some things I needed to know how the world truly worked. And I'm also glad that I watched this with my mother, so I could be able to ask her questions about what happened during these time periods and what happened back then and what happens now, so I could further understand the world around me. It's a very raw world that we live in, and A Time to Kill is one of those films that does show that this shit still isn't getting better, but there is hope in the world. There are people that are willing to right their wrongs. There are people willing to listen, to drop the bigotry, to realize, why are you hating someone for having a different skin color? Why is justice not being made to those with color? I wish I could speak better about this. I can only say what I know because of how much I hate racism. I hate it with every fiber being of my soul because I don't like hatred. I don't like bullies. I don't like cruelty. I don't put up with that shit. I've been through enough cruel things in my life. A Time to Kill is just one of many films that will talk about the things that can't be talked about, but the way it does it here, it speaks volumes. And with that said, I'm going to go ahead and cap off the episode before I get way too emotional about this. But I would like to make a special announcement. So I reached out to one of the artists in my area named AC3 when I caught wind that he's going to be putting out an album. And let me tell you about AC3. He is one of the most amazing performers I have seen in quite some time. And I'm basically called the veteran of open mic night, so I've seen some performances that go really good, some that go really bad, some people that need work. It's not going to surprise me if I see AC3 winning a Grammy one day. Let me just put it at that. I'm not trying to blow smoke up his ass, but on the times that I've seen him perform and the way that he ignites the crowd and gets everyone going, that's the sign of a really good artist. And he has an album coming out called Life Path 5 that will be out January 26th, and it's available on all platforms. So mark your calendar. If you're looking for some new music, I would definitely encourage you to go check out AC3 2085. You will not be disappointed. And AC3, thank you so much for what you do. Thank you for supporting my work. I appreciate you so much, and I know you have a bright future ahead. And with that said, I have one more special announcement. Next week, I have a surprise. I'm going to be having a guest on my show, and that's going to stay just with 3 people. Me, myself, and I. I've been planning this guest appearance for quite some time. I've been talking with the guest and what we'll be talking about in the show, and that will be the last episode of the Screen Queen before we get into the Valentine's Day series. So I'm looking forward to not having to pick from the suggestion jar, but this has also been a collaboration in the making probably since I started doing this show, since my guest listens to every single episode that comes out. So y'all know this is a very big deal to have one of the main supporters of the show on here. So I'm going to cap off the information because I don't want to give anything else away. Thank you so much for listening to this episode. I know this was a tough one There were a lot of tough topics, and I hope that I gave it justice. If you have some thoughts about the movie that you would like to share with me, because I always welcome a conversation about movies, you can find me on my Instagram at the Queen of the Screen. If you want to see the funny movie related stuff I post up, as well as behind the scenes, you can find me on my TikTok at the Mystical Space Switch. And if you're interested in the book series that I wrote called Inglorious Inc., you can find that in the description box. Alrighty, you all take care now and stay amazing. This is your Screen Queen signing off. Bye bye!